Well, good morning, everyone, for joining us here in Singapore, and good day to everybody else joining us from other parts of the world. And I think today we have people from as close to Singapore as Malaysia next door, and then we have some attendees from China, Australia, Europe, and North and South America. So thank you and welcome to our Wildcat lecture today. My name is Carmen Pang and I'm with SWAG. SWAG is the Singapore Wildcat Action Group. And today's lecture is very special because we're going to learn about the leopard cat, which is the largest wildcat species that we still have in Singapore. And in fact, Rachel Lee, she is a SWAG volunteer and a very talented designer. And she was inspired by the leopard cat when she created our SWAG logo. And about our speaker, if you've seen our Facebook page, you have noticed that our cover photo is a leopard cat. And that is actually a photo taken by Marcus, our speaker today. So obviously the leopard cat is very dear to all of us at SWAG, and we're very excited to learn more about it. But before we proceed, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping items. So first of all, we'll be recording today's session, and the recording will be available on our SWAG YouTube channel later on, and we'll put up the link to our YouTube channel in the chat box, so please go ahead and click it and subscribe it and follow us. And then also to make sure that everybody can hear well, you will be muted throughout the lecture, so please use the chat function to ask your questions and post your comments. We'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll ask the submitted questions after the presentation. And also, just before we proceed, I'm going to just say that, we created SWAG to increase awareness of wildcat conservation in Singapore, and more importantly, to support MyCat, which is the Malaysian Conservation Alliance for Tigers in Malaysia. And if you'd like to learn more about SWAG or MyCat, you'll find the links to our website and our social media pages in the chat box right now. And you can you will be able to access our pages as well. And then here to tell you a little bit more about MyCat is my fellow swagger and co-host Vilma, Dr. Vilma Di Rosario. And then she is going to be introducing our speaker as well. So Vilma, I'm going to turn the screen over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Carmen. Good morning and welcome everyone, and thank you very much for coming. I'm going to say a little bit about what brought SWAG together, and it's the Malayan tiger.
While that happens, we'll launch a poll.
Thank you.
And you should see a screen which will ask you, what do you think is the status of leopard cats in Singapore? So you could choose questions. And this will run as Vilma is talking. Once you're done, you can close the screen.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. So.
Yay. Okay. So what brought SWAG together is the Malayan tiger, a very magnificent wildcat, a large wildcat, locally extinct in Singapore. We lost our tiger in 1930. Due to the fact that a lot of its natural habitat was cleared for agriculture, and tigers were considered a danger to humans. And the tiger is now globally critically endangered. And I'm talking about the Malayan tiger, and there are only 200 or less than 200 left in the world in Malaysia. And the Malayan tiger was what brought us together as we partnered with MyCat, the Malaysian Conservation Alliance for Tigers, which is an alliance of 5 NGOs, the Malayan Nature Society, Traffic Southeast Asia, the Wildlife Conservation Society, the Wildlife Society of Selangor, and WWF Malaysia. And MyCat is supported strongly by the government, Perhentian, the Department of Wildlife and National Parks of Peninsular Malaysia. So the avenue we volunteer is through Catwalk. It's called Citizen Action for Tigers, or Catwalk. It's an anti-poaching, anti-deforestation surveillance walk by volunteers like ourselves at the Sungai Yu Ecological Corridor in Pahang, Malaysia. And since 2015, more than 300 people living in Singapore have gone to Pahang to do catwalk, looking out for snares and traps and illegal activity as we hike in the forest. We help MyCat also collect data on wildlife. As you can see on the left, Rachel and Ray are putting up a camera trap. And on the right, the group is sharing photos from the camera trap. Indeed, a very exciting thing to look at the wildlife that has passed by our trail camera. We also plant trees. And on this day, this group planted 25 trees. The trees are native and they are part of MyCat's Trees for Tigers reforestation program. Now, catwalks are on hold. They have been on hold since March because of the current pandemic. So MyCat instead has been mobilizing the local people, the local Orang Asli from the indigenous Batik tribe, for tiger protection, surveillance walks, and for habitat restoration through their community ranger patrol as well as reforestation efforts. And MyCat needs funds for this. So we'd really humbly like to ask you to support MyCat at this global giving link, which will be in the chat box. Please, any amount will add up. And we also want to congratulate MyCat because in the last 26 days, since starting being on the Global Giving platform, they've raised close to $16,000 from 89 donors, and in 11th position out of over 300 people competing for funds. So well done, MyCat, and please, everyone, do consider being a donor. SWAG is doing also some humble fundraising. Please, if you feel like donating to MyCat, buy our children's books. We have 2 published with a 3rd on the way. The 2 titles are Little Tiger and Little Tiger in Myanmar. The books follow a young tiger on its travels. The first book is Little Tiger Meeting Poachers. And the second book is Little Tiger Meeting Little Leopard, who's caught in a snare. And leopards, the Indo-Chinese leopard, was also a wildcat of Singapore and sadly gone. So the books are only $10, and 100% of the profits from the sale of these books will go to MyCat. And we proudly like to launch our leopard cat tote bag right now. The beautiful design of the leopard cat was done by our swagger volunteer Rachel Lee, and made into a bag. It cost $32.50, and 100% of profits raised from the sale of this bag will go to leopard cat conservation in Singapore. And we're waiting for Marcus to tell us, what we can do. We're going to raise the funds and definitely do some outreach, but what else can we do with the funds? Please do consider buying our bag. It's on the back of it, it says Run Wild, and we want to raise awareness that leopard cats shouldn't be pets. They should run wild and free. So thank you for listening to me and Carmen. And now I'm going to introduce Marcus, our eminent speaker for today. Marcus is, I think, known to the biodiversity community in Singapore well for all his work. He is currently a senior tutor at the Lee Kong Chian Museum of Natural History. His particular area is mammal biodiversity, and he's the curator of mammals and birds at the museum. He has an MSc in biological studies and biological sciences, and in 2010, between 2010 and 2012, he studied the leopard cat, and he's going to tell us all about that. He's currently doing his doctoral studies in the United States at the George Mason University, and he's studying chaperoutine. I want to say a little bit about Marcus' personal stuff. I feel really privileged to have been accompanying Marcus, following him around in those early days, 2010 to 2012, looking for leopard cats. And indeed, when I followed Marcus on his studies, I saw my first leopard cat and a few others as well. So I'm really grateful to Marcus for that. It was really great times traveling to various parts of Singapore, which I would never have had a chance to go to because they are restricted. So thank you, Marcus, and thank you very much for giving us this talk. Ladies and gentlemen, and all wild animals, may I present Mr. Marcus Chua. Marcus, I have to.
Thanks for the introduction, Vilma. Well, thanks first to Swag for inviting me to to share more with you about leopard cats. I shall share my screen, and as I work this out, I would say that Vilma was a great field help in for leopard cat work I did for my master's, which so I'm going to share with you right now. So the title of the talk is Leopard Cats in Singapore, Surprising Discoveries in Our Forest, but are they here to stay? So this was part of my Masters of Science work with the National University of Singapore, and it was a project that was advised by Professor Peter Ng as well as Mr. Nsivasong T. So let's dive right into leopard cats and what's happening in the region. So in Southeast Asia, there has been massive habitat loss in Southeast Asia, and it's termed an impending biodiversity disaster due to the scale of habitat loss, forest loss, as well as human impact. And by 2010, this region has lost about 70% of lowland forests and 65% of peat swamp forests. That's a whole lot. Majority of the forest has been lost. And in Singapore, we're considered a worst case scenario where we have lost more than 95% of primary forests. And this has resulted in the extinction of megafauna, such as the tiger. The leopard is also extirpated. So what is left is this wild cat. We call the leopard cat. Although we refer to the leopard cat every day just as a single term, what happened in the last few years was that we've always known that there were several forms of leopard cats because they look very different across the range from Pakistan to Siberia, all the way down south to Java. So there was a study done by Patel et al., a genetic study, and they found that there are several different lineages of leopard cats. And if you look at the photo, you can see they look quite different. And after the study was done, the IUCN cat specialist group decided to classify the leopard cats as two species. So the mainland leopard cats, which are the two larger leopard cats you see on your screen on the top, which range on the Asian mainland, as well as the Sunda leopard cat that is found in Sumatra, Borneo, the Philippines, as well as Java. But what's interesting about it, which I will come to later, is that in the Malay Peninsula, so if you look at the cursor from Malaysia, southern Thailand, all the way to Singapore, they term this part a possible hybrid or admixture zone, where there seems to be signatures of leopard cats, the mainland leopard cats, as well as Sunda leopard cats. So exactly which leopard cat do we have in Singapore? This is one question which I would address as we go on to the presentation. So back to the leopard cats in Singapore. Leopard cats in Singapore were last seen alive before my study on the mainland in 1968. And it was described that it may be at the brink of extinction, right? Its conservation status is critically endangered. And let's see. Just now, as you guys are coming in, there was a poll, and I'm going to share the results of the poll as what you think. So most people correctly identified the status of the leopard cat as critically endangered in Singapore. So this is a concern for sure. So when I was about to embark on my study, I thought about what would be the most important questions we should answer in order to give us information to conserve the leopard cats. Well, so one thing we know is that leopard cats, although they were last seen alive on the mainland in 1968, but they were more commonly seen as roadkills in from the year 2000 onwards. So on top, the top picture is a leopard cat roadkill in Mandai, 2001, and below is 2017 roadkill in Jalan Bahar near NTU. Right? But in 2006, researcher Norman Lip, who's now a lecturer at NTU and IE, found a small population of leopard cats while doing field surveys for Sunda Pangolin. And so this presents an opportunity to study the species and find out more about it in Singapore. So my research aims were to find out, one, what is the distribution and abundance of leopard cats in Singapore? Where are they? As well as how many there are. Its habitat use and activity pattern, where they are, when are they active, its diet, what does the leopard cat eat, as well as its genetic status. So to answer these questions, I looked at several study areas in Singapore. So there are 4 major forest fragments left in Singapore, and they include the Western Catchment, which is also a live firing area, the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve and Central Catchment Nature Reserve, the Central Forested Nature Reserve in Singapore, and offshore islands, which are Pulau Ubin, as well as Pulau Tekong. So this study focused on 3 of the 4 major forest fragments. They are the Western Catchment, Bukit Timah and Central Catchment Nature Reserve, because there have been leopard cat roadkills in the area, as well as Pulau Tekong, where we know there's a known population. I surveyed Pulau Ubin in 2008 and 2009 as part of my final year project in NUS, so we didn't find any leopard cats on the island at that time. So we go forward. So in order to answer the first 2 questions of where leopard cats are, how many are there, and what is the activity pattern, what's their behavior, I set up camera traps across the 3 forest fragments. So they are in squares. They are approximately spaced 1 kilometer apart. And the benefit of having a camera trap is that they are a little box with a camera in them. When wildlife passes right in front of them, it triggers a photo to be taken. So we could tell what time was taken, what time did animal pass, and what animal it was. So this is really useful. And also we did line transect surveys, the ones that you heard Vilma talk about. She came along with me, and we walked along this transect, or this lines in the forest, to look for signs of leopard cats. So when we stopped, we rested, especially on the island of Pulau Tekong, which is a military island, at midnight. Sometimes we stopped and we waved at some of the military people. So I'm sure they had a fright, or they were pleasantly surprised that people sitting around the forest at night. So to do our population density estimates, there's a bit of lag. Right, I did a capture-recapture analysis using the camera traps. So what's unique about many species of marked animals, such as cats, is that they have unique markings. So I have to put, you could identify leopard cats based on their unique spot patterns, like human fingerprints, right? So I had twin camera traps along the trail, one each side, so if a leopard cat passes, I could get photographs of leopard cats on both sides. So there were 17 stations in Pulau Tekong, and they were, I chose a period between July to November as the time to make the population estimate, because the assumption for this study, for capture-recapture analysis, is that you must have geographic closure. I think that's a set area that I want to do the study, and there must be demographic closure, meaning that it must be approximate that during this period, there are no births, no deaths, and no immigration into or out of the island. Okay. So you can see a photo of a leopard cat taken by a camera trap. Right? So from there, I mentioned the camera trap capture-recapture analysis. So you can see on the left side and the right side of the square are 2 different leopard cats. Leopard cat 03, which is a female, and leopard cat 14, which is another female. And from the squares, you can see a leopard cat never changes its spots. So you can tell that these two photos, top and bottom, are taken at different times, but it's not the same animal. So with that, I could construct a capture history of all the cats recorded on Pulau Tekong, and there is a statistical analysis that can estimate the number of leopard cats on the island. Right. To answer the question on what does a leopard cat eat and what is its genetic status, I looked at poop, because it's very hard to catch a leopard cat just to study that, and it's very invasive. So I relied on feces, and we tell that they are the leopard cat feces by the presence of leopard cat hair, because cats groom themselves, so they end up swallowing bits of their own fur. So that's a positive identification of the leopard cat. And also we looked at we confirmed it with their DNA. Right. So stomach contents of a leopard cat, remember the top roadkill in 2001, that was actually collected and preserved at the Natural History Museum. So more than 10 years later, I looked at the stomach contents to find out what did it eat. Right. And so the prey remains from the stomach contents and as well as the feces were washed out with ethanol and with water. So you see the bottom right photo, they look like that. It's a mess. But we find out small little fragments of bones, feathers, hairs, and those were compared with the reference collection in the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum. So what did we find? So first, the presence and distribution of leopard cats. We found on Pulau Tekong, it's expected there was a population of leopard cats, and they were found across secondary forest habitats on the island. We also found records of leopard cats in the western catchment area. Right? So we know they are doing well there. And we have this photo of this sub-adult, a young individual, on a simple ayah tree. And in Bukit Timah Nature Reserve, we recall that there was no leopard cat seen alive since 1968. So on 1st April 2001, I was out on a survey, and lo and behold, we saw an eye shine, and we saw a leopard cat, and we took a photo, and that was the first leopard cat seen in almost 50 years in Singapore main island. So I quickly texted my supervisors then, which was Siva and Peter Ng, and I had to remind them that this is not an April Fool's joke because it's 1st April. And so from then on, we named the leopard cat April Fools. So that was the first question. So how many leopard cats were there though? So in total, we recorded 31 individual leopard cats on Pulau Tekong over 2 years, but this is not the population estimate because leopard cats can give birth to young, or some of them have passed away in the process. So the estimate during the 4-month period is actually 21 adult leopard cats on the island. And it works out to approximately 89 leopard cats per 100 kilometers square. Cat researchers normally use this as a benchmark to look at density. So although the island is smaller than 100 kilometers square, this is the mathematical equivalent, and this is known to be one of the highest in the world. But it's a bit of an irony because they are still considered nationally critically endangered in Singapore. We'll get to why such a high density in a little bit. Right? So where did the leopard cats go to, or how are they using the landscape? So we did an analysis of the habitat use parameters. I used a model, and we found that there was an increase in camera trap capture rate, right? When there is decreased canopy closure. So they seem to like areas that are more open and which are closer to plantations. So there is a small plantation, all palm plantation, at the eastern side of Pulau Tekong, and there seems to be a high capture rate of leopard cats over there. So you can see some photos of the leopard cats taken across the island, right? And also, we found that leopard cats seem to be moving a great deal more on the western side of the island compared to the eastern side of the island. So it seems that in the eastern side of the island, where there is mentioned the plantation, there are many more leopard cats, and they seem to be moving only a short distance as recorded by camera traps. But on the western side of the island, mostly secondary forests, you can see the lines, each color represents the movement or the recaptures of an individual leopard cat across the island. You can see that they actually moved a lot further. We'll get to why in a little bit. But what is also interesting is that if you look at the little channel that's separating the Pulau Tekong. What's south of the channel is actually a large slab of reclaimed land, and it's we actually recorded leopard cats in the reclaimed land. What is most notable is, besides the leopard cats can be found on reclaimed land, is that this patch of reclaimed forest is only about 20 to 30 years old. So we know that secondary forests can be important leopard cat habitats. That's to be noted. Right? So you could see the mean distance moved in the western side of the island for leopard cats is approximately 2 kilometers. In the eastern side of the island, it's about 500 meters. So it's just a fraction. Right? And also during the study, there is leopard cat 14. We call that she was the one that I used for comparison of leopard cat spots. We found a really old friend. So also, we recorded her in 2nd July, 3rd July and 27th July. And in the last shot, we actually got a photo of her with a kitten. But what is also remarkable is that we call that Norman did a study of leopard cats in 2006. And this was one of the leopard cats he recorded. So we get information. So this sort of time-based study allows us to get information about longevity of a leopard cat. And we know that leopard cats on Pulau Tekong can live at least up to 7 years old. And because she's such a survivor, nickname her Beyonce. And this is also one of the leopard cats that show up on the event promo posters. Right, so you can see that the spots remain the same. That's how we identified her. Right. So what does a leopard cat eat? So on the island of Pulau Tekong, majority of the diet of leopard cats consists of mammals. They included the house rat, as well as plantain squirrels. There was a little bit of reptiles, which are skinks and lizards, ring-crested lizard, as well as the changeable lizard, about 4% of the diet, compared to 90%, which is mammal. There was also a bit of birds and insects, and then there was an unidentified frog. Later on, we did a DNA analysis of its diet content. So I did another analysis with DNA, and we found that the bird that they ate was actually a yellow-vented bobo. And the house rat might actually have been mistaken identity because there were also Polynesian rats that were recorded from the DNA in addition to the house rat. So what was also interesting was that we compared the leopard cat scats that were found next to plantations and leopard cat scats that were found only in secondary forests. And we found that scats in plantations, the ones that are in black bars, compared to the scats that were found in forests, which are white bars, actually had much more rodents in them. Right? Conversely, leopard cat scats that were only found in forests had more birds, had more reptiles, and had more arthropods in them. So there's some sort of switch going on Pulau Tekong. Right. So looking at the stomach of the 2001 leopard cat roadkill, since there's only one sample, I could show the pictures. So we found bits of large rat, most likely Sundamis anandeli. There was a red-legged crake, and there was many line sun skin. So the stomach, this leopard cat actually died with a stomach that was full. So it's quite unfortunate that he died. So for the genetic analysis component, we found that the leopard cats in Singapore actually belong to the Sunda haplotype. And that's interesting because if you look at the map, it actually is the dark brown representation on the map, right? But it also includes some leopard cats that have been found with this haplotype, includes leopard cats from Southern Peninsula, Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, and Borneo. But it's not surprising because we talk about sea level rise now because of climate change, but there has been cycles of sea level rises and falling because of different ice ages across geological time. And the most recent period when sea level was really low was 10 to 15,000 years ago. And at that time, I'm going to show you the map, sea level was so low that you could actually walk, if you want, from Singapore to Sumatra and to Borneo because it's exposed land. So during that time, leopard cats could actually walk or move from Peninsula Malaysia to Sumatra or to Borneo. And that might account for why this DNA haplotype is found across this region. And this would come into relevance again later. Right. But we look at the population genetics analysis for the DNA. So within the population of Pulau Tekong, we found that all Pulau Tekong samples were identical. So I collected about 60 pieces of leopard cat species poop. And it's extremely unlikely that the same leopard cat actually laid the same poop all across the island. Because recall that they actually quite site specific. Those on the eastern side of the island don't move very much. Those on the western side of the island moved a lot more. Right? So this indicates low genetic variability in the leopard cat population. And as few, having as low as 1 matriline. So all the leopard cats on Pulau Tekong are related, and they probably related to one original female line, right? So my supervisor at the time says, this is almost like going to a village or a town, and everyone in the village is related. So that's pretty quite shocking. Right, for humans, but later we looked at the results and tried to say what's the significance of it. We found that there could be 3 hypotheses for this. This could be one, because the island is really small. Pulau Tekong is about 25 kilometers square. There could be a genetic drift to one direction that favors only one haplotype on the island. Or in the past sometime, there could have been a population reduction that results in a bottleneck. So there have been a lot of leopard cats because of habitat loss. There was a lot of the islands was cleared for plantations, for rubber, for other purposes as well. A small population could have remained, and that which slowly recovered, and that's why we only see one haplotype. Third, another hypothesis could be that leopard cats could have been naturally monomorphic because of female philopathy. What does this mean is that a lot of wild cats, what happens is that when a female breeds, when she gives birth to a young, her daughters would tend to stay around her, inherit part of her territory or home range, while her sons, the male cats, would disperse and go somewhere else. So because of this, you can have a matriline of leopard cats, right? Because the mitochondrial DNA I looked at is maternally inherited, that stays in a certain area, and that could be what we see on Pulau Tekong, right? But all this point to a possible likelihood of inbreeding in the Pulau Tekong leopard cats, and this is a threat because of the small population size. And we know that for some cats, inbreeding leads to inbreeding depression. So this is the Florida panther, and you can see signs of inbreeding depression from cowlicks on the first on the coat, as well as kink tails. And it has also been found that a lot of inbred Florida panthers suffer from heart diseases, or they might have fertility issues. So does this problem present itself in Pulau Tekong? We don't know, right? But what we know from the results is that there seems to be overlapping habitat and diet niche going on the island, which is typical in cats, right? And one reason why we see so many leopard cats on Pulau Tekong is the type of habitat that supports the leopard cat's prey, right? Studies have found that in primary forests, the main leopard cat prey, which is small animals, small rodents, tends to be pretty low, 4 to 7 individuals per hectare. But in disturbed forests, this rises to about 16 individuals per hectare. But in plantations such as palm or other fruit orchards, rat populations can go up to 290 individuals per hectare. So this is almost like a free-for-all buffet for leopard cats, right? Rajaratnam, a study done in Borneo, found that there could be increased catchability of rats in monoculture plantations, especially oil palm. If the trees or plants are spaced far apart, leopard cats might be able to spot its prey better or catch them more easily. Next, the wildcat land tenure system could allow cats to be more abundant when more prey are present. So that's what we discussed just now. But also on Pulau Tekong, there is low competition and predation on the island. So the leopard cat is the only mammalian carnivore or carnivoran on the island. There's no civets. Large cats have all been extirpated. So there is no competition, there's no predation. And its only likely predator seems to be the reticulated python. Yeah, so we find that plantation with forest seems to be a unique or something that we see more often in Singapore, not only in Singapore, in Southeast Asia as well. So we find that these spots are probably good leopard cat foraging sites. Here we can see photos of them within the plantation area, perching on termite mounds to look around its surroundings. And most of them are probably hunting at night. Right? So one of the questions we asked during the study is that, do leopard cats live in plantations? So during my study, what we found is that we didn't find any leopard cats in the daytime in the plantation, but only at night. And there seems to be a bit of a lag in their activity pattern in that they only arrive in the plantation about an hour after they are active across the island. So it could be that leopard cats are moving out of the forest and into the plantation areas where the rats are in high abundance, feeding there and leaving the plantation in the daytime to rest in the forest. But in other studies done in Malaysia and Indonesia, depending on how plantations are managed, researchers have found leopard cats living within the off-palm plantations as well. So I think management has an impact on how leopard cats use this human-modified landscapes. So then we asked the question whether this is a conservation dilemma or is this a reconciliation or ecology opportunity? How do we manage all these areas so that we can better support wildlife? Because during the study, not only did we record leopard cats, we also recorded threatened species in Southeast Asia, such as the Sunda slow loris, as well as the Sunda pangolins. So if we manage this area as well, it could be a way where we can help stem wildlife loss or further wildlife loss from the landscape. So now back to the Singapore story. So the national conservation status after my study didn't change. The leopard cat remains nationally critically endangered with less than 50 mature individuals. We know that there are breeding populations on Pulau Tekong and in the Western catchment because we have seen young animals there. But is there hope for the leopard cat in the future? Right? So some of these questions to think about is that there's been massive habitat loss and fragmentation in Singapore. And both breeding populations are in habitats that are not under national legal habitat protection framework. They're not part of nature reserves. They do not come under the Parks and Trees Act because they are under MINDEF. Right? But yet they still receive military protection. So in a way, they function as preserves. But another thing to think about is the planned developments that are going on in these areas and across other leopard cat habitats on the island. So let's look at the land use plan for Singapore beyond 2030, issued by the Ministry of National Development. You'll notice that the 4 main habitat forest fragments remain, right? But they are pretty fragmented. So you don't see a clear connection across them. And if you look at my mouse going on here, I think what's one important thing that we can do in Singapore is to connect the Western catchment with the Central catchment and Bukit Timah nature reserves. But right now there is no clear connection. So one important thing that may be able to be done is to ensure a connectivity within this area. And this has to be forest connectivity because the leopard cats will not use an open streetscape, for example. Right? So one thing that has to be looked really carefully is the secondary forest that might be lost due to the upcoming Tengah HDB plan. Next, we also want to zoom in on Pulau Tekong, where this is holds the largest population of leopard cats in Singapore. So if you see what's happening is that there seems to be planned infrastructure work on the eastern side of the island, and there is still a lot of reclamation that's going on in the southern part of the island. I'm going to overlay the leopard cat habitat map over here. Notice that the infrastructure indicated on the island actually overlaps with a known leopard cat hotspot area on the eastern side of the island. So this is a potential cause for concern for leopard cats in Singapore. Next, human disturbance and activities is also a possible threat, because we talked about 2 roadkills in 2001 and 2008, but within the last 5 years, there has been at least 4 leopard cat roadkills right? So we know that when leopard cats live close to human areas, they have a lower survival rate, as well as mainly due to roadkill mortality. So the ones 2 leopard cats on top were found in Sungai Buloh Wetland Reserve, as well as near Bukit Timah Nature Reserve in 2015. I'm sorry about that extremely mangled one, third from the top. That was in 2008 along Mandai Lake Road. And the one at the bottom was found in Changi and just last year, 2009. So if there are so few leopard cats left in Singapore, with 4 leopard cat roadkills in the last 5 years, this is a large chunk of the population taken out. So this is certainly a worrying trend, right? And with the consolidation of military activities on Pulau Tekong, as reported in the papers, what does this hold for leopard cats on Pulau Tekong as well? Right? So other potential threats include wild and feral animals found on Pulau Tekong as well as in the Western catchment. They include dogs, feral cats, as well as wild pigs. And in Taiwan, we know that leopard cats are actually vulnerable to the canine, some feline diseases as well, which results in them being more susceptible to roadkill. We don't know whether this is present in the leopard cats in Singapore, and this is certainly something to be looked into. Next, we know that there is low genetic variability in leopard cat population in Singapore, and one question that arises is, what is the impact on the animal's health? So this remains unanswered, and it's something to be investigated if you are interested about the leopard cat's future in Singapore. Next, poaching and the illegal trade is certainly an issue as well. So in 2018, you can see on the left side, 2 endangered Asian leopard cats were found abandoned in the Bukit Batok HDB block, and they were rescued by ACRES. But those were not the only 2. So see 2 endangered Asian leopard rescued from an HDB flat, and they were returned to the wild in Malaysia. So at this point, I'd like to really commend the work of ACRES as well as WRS, that actually they receive these animals or they get tipped off, and AVA at that time, which is NParks, now actually helped to confiscate the animals from the flats. And they were 2 of these animals were with ACRES, were with WRS care for some time, and we did the genetic testing, and we found out that they were actually not the Singapore leopard cat haplotype. That's how we knew that they were imported illegally in Singapore, and 2 of them were actually repatriated by ACRES to the Department of Wildlife National Parks in Malaysia. But here it seems that there are actually 2 leopard cats, but actually there were 4 leopard cats, at least 4 leopard cats in 2008. 2 of them were returned to Malaysia, right? And the fine that the owner on the right actually faced was just $500 under the Endangered Species Import-Export Act. So this is certainly something that to be aware about. The leopard cats don't make good pets, and it actually results in damaging the environment, because you're actually removing leopard cats from the environment, and they play an important role in regulating the ecosystem in terms of being a mesopredator that feeds mainly on small animals. Right? So this is a threat, and we don't know whether there is leopard cat poaching in Singapore, but we know that if there is demand in Singapore as for them as pets, the population in Singapore is certainly under threat as well. Right. So back to the ultimate question of whether leopard cats will be here to stay in Singapore. So we ask one question to ask ourselves is there enough habitat for leopard cats in Singapore? Would our land use or the way of using them permit coexistence? And how many cats can Singapore habitats support? So based on the study, as well as from ongoing studies by the National Parks Board, we know that there are at least 21 leopard cats on Pulau Tekong on the eastern side here. In 2012, on Pulau Ubin, we know that at least 2, this is from a study for the Common Palm Civet by Fung Tze Kuan as well as the National Parks Board recently. At least 2 leopard cats are found on the island. In the Central Catchment Nature Reserve, we know that there are at least 3 leopard cats found there. But of course, 1 has been killed on the road. So is it 3 now still, or is it less than 3? In the Western Catchment, we also know approximately 3 leopard cats are present there. And all these numbers are consistent with the carrying capacity of leopard cats in this sort of secondary forest habitats we have in Singapore and within the 4 forest fragments. So we ask ourselves whether 6 leopard cats, approximate number of 6 to 7 leopard cats in Singapore is a sustainable number at all. And what can we or what should we do if we want to prevent the extinction of leopard cats here? So certainly something to think about is a conservation plan. And this would be necessary to keep our last remaining wildcat in Singapore and not lose it to habitat loss or poaching. Right. So one thing that's important to do is that our last population study was done in 2012. So what's the status of leopard cats on Pulau Tekong right now? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? So a monitoring program is necessary. At the same time, we would like to find out about whether its monomorphic genetic haplotype results in inbreeding, and what's the health status of leopard cats on the island. Next, it's also important to protect the green spaces, right? Any secondary forest habitat that's more than 20 years old are potential leopard cat habitats, as we know from Pulau Tekong, right? So any loss might be a loss of leopard cat habitats. Next, stakeholder engagement and buy-in for conservation is important. This can't be stressed enough in Singapore, but fortunately in Singapore, the agencies are all on board, and there are several discussions about this already. And I would say one of the most important thing is to reduce road kills for leopard cats in Singapore. If there are less than 10 in Singapore, one loss of leopard cat on the road is 10% of its population. Right? So there should be enforced speed limits as well as road calming features, especially around leopard cat habitats. Right? This will also be important for other wildlife or would benefit other wildlife as well. So with this, I would acknowledge that this study was actually generously supported by the Wildlife Reserve Singapore Conservation Fund. I'll thank my supervisors for the support as well as the advice they've given me throughout the study. And as well as a few assistants, there were so many that helped me. Otherwise, just going over to Pulau Tekong, cycling around the island would have been extremely hard and lugging around 17 camera traps. Actually double that. Right? So thank you very much for your attention. I think we have some time, 10 minutes left for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. That's very interesting. Obviously there's a lot that we need to do. And you're right. Are you okay if we run over a little bit? Because, if we have a lot of questions. So I'll just go right into it. If Marcus, your timing is okay for us to run over a little bit. Let's see, there were many questions that came in from the PTIC signups as well. So I'm going to start with that one. Vilma, do you want to ask that first question, please? Vilma, you're muted.
Yeah. There are a few questions from wildlife photographers about photography of leopard cats. They're wondering where can I or where can we find leopard cats so that we can take photos of them? Where, what time, etc. They want to take photos. Marcus?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I'll say leopard, it's actually not that easy to photograph a leopard cat or to spot one. So it requires a lot of luck. And because they're so secretive and they're nocturnal, it makes it even more challenging. So in Singapore, if you go to some of our nature areas, you might have a chance to see leopard cats. So maybe somewhere like some of nature parks like Thomson Nature Park, or if you go to Chestnut, there might be a chance. But if you go overseas, such as if you go on trip to SWAG's My Cat Walks, I heard that volunteers who've gone on these walks, actually, almost all of them have seen a leopard cat, because as part of the walks, they get to visit different habitats, and some of them actually see leopard cats there. So this might be a chance for people to see leopard cats. So I encourage you to, if you're interested to photograph a leopard cat, that might be a way. And you also contribute to tiger conservation as well.
Yeah, so yes, thank you, Marcus. And do talk to us if you're interested in joining us for a catwalk. Okay, next question. It's from our audience here today. in the chat box. So Marcus, is translocation of the leopard cat across Western catchment, Central catchment, and Pulau Tekong possible, given the small population, implying that there's a small genetic pool?
So translocation might be possible, but I think most importantly, before we look at translocation, you want to, first we want to try to see whether they can move naturally. So corridors would be important. So I think in line with that, the most important thing is try to ensure that the appropriate connectors between the habitats in place. And if that is not possible, then we look at translocation. The difficulty is that if there are so few leopard cats already on the mainland, say example of 3 to 4 leopard cats on the west and 3 in the central parts of the forest, if you move one out, you're actually creating, you're actually moving what, a quarter to half the population there. So what would happen to the population you're moving leopard cats away from? Would it collapse? Right. So that's one question. So the concern is moving leopard cats from already a small population up to another place with a small population. How would it be received? Is it already reaching carrying capacity? Would the addition of a new cat result in fights that results in leopard cats killing each other because of territorial squabble? So without further study about this, I think it's hard to embark on a translocation plan. But personally, I would think that if there is a plan to translocate leopard cats, the best population to look at would be to look at the Pulau Tekong population where it's the biggest and most dense. We might be able to move leopard cats out of Pulau Tekong into other forest fragments in Singapore. But this has to be clearly studied well before anything like this is done. Track the leopard cat after post-release to see how is it doing. Is it taking up a space in the landscape, or what's its condition after release? So there are so many questions regarding that, but that is certainly one of the conservation solutions is to introduce leopard cats by supplementing its numbers.
Okay, good, thank you. Vilma, do you have the next question?
Yes, this is regarding breeding. People are interested about breeding of, or interbreeding between domestic cats and leopard cats. Could you enlighten us on this, Marcus?
I think the question is probably related to how Bengal cat hybrids are created. So there is a breed of domestic cat hybrid known as the Bengal cat, which arises from the hybridization between domestic cats as well as leopard cats. But these hybrids that are legal as pets are usually from the 4th generation and beyond. Right? So hybridization between leopard cats and domestic cats do occur in captivity, but it's never been recorded in the wild. So I would think that if wild leopard cat mates are available and they're not forced to be in a confined space, leopard cat would usually not choose to mate with a domestic cat. So although there is some risk of hybridization or so-called genetic pollution, so far it's not been recorded in the wild in nature yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Okay, we have a question here that was asking about the leopard cat. Are leopard cats 100% averse to water? And then there's a related question that actually, another one related to water is, are leopard cats known to swim across between the mainland islands or even to and from southern peninsula Malaysia?
So leopard cats are in a lineage that, with the fishing cats and the fat-headed cats, that actually seem to love water. So leopard cats have also been recorded swimming in captivity across moats and moats, like they like to play with water. And there has been observation in the wild of leopard cats swimming across a big river. So they don't seem to be adverse to water. So it seems that leopard cats in Singapore and southern Johor might be a meta population, especially in the western catchment and Pulau Tekong, where they might be able to swim and disperse across to each other. So yeah, so they're likely not averse to water and can swim. And the distance between Pulau Tekong to southern Johor, it's probably not more than 400 to 500 meters, which I think a leopard cat can comfortably swim across.
Okay. Vilma, next question?
Yes. is there any current research being done in Singapore on leopard cats? And are there any, is there any way that we can support, research to boost population of leopard cats in Singapore?
So right now, I know NParks has a active monitoring of its managed areas, nature reserve, nature parks. So they have camera traps that are put up to monitor wildlife, presence of wildlife. So that is one thing that that's being done. But there's been no targeted study specifically at for leopard cats. After my 2012 study, I actually applied for a permit in 2015 to try to do a resurvey of Pulau Tekong to find out what's the population. But unfortunately, the permit was rejected owing to a lot of activities on the island, which is not safe. And I tried again in 2016 and it was similarly rejected. So I think, but right now I'm based in Washington, DC, and I'm not in Singapore. So it's hard to continue with that. Once I come back to Singapore after my studies, I'm planning to conduct a resurvey of leopard cats in Singapore. Right? So there are no active leopard cats in Singapore, but how people can contribute to the conservation of leopard cats, I think there are several. One is, one thing I didn't mention in the conservation plan is education as well as public outreach. It's important that more people learn about leopard cats. So if you've attended this talk, tell your friends that actually leopard cats are found in Singapore. They are nationally critically endangered. And we need to protect all our green spaces. So if you're concerned about leopard cats and other wildlife in Singapore, if there is a green space, secondary forest that is potential leopard cat habitats or a corridor that might be lost, then I think what you could do is to speak up, let your concerns be known to the relevant authorities so that they could look into it.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. And like we mentioned earlier, SWAG will be looking into possibly raising some money to do some conservation outreach right here in Singapore. So do follow us and we'll keep you guys updated. How about we take 2 more questions? So will be probably slightly over, but I have here a question, Marcus. Any idea of the rate of interaction with domestic animals, between domestic animals and the leopard cat, and especially because we're so densely populated in terms of human, and we live so closely with wildlife, and in those areas with more interactions, if there are any interactions, what is the availability of the prey community?
So this hasn't been studied extensively in Singapore, but in Korea or Japan, there have been studies done to look at whether leopard cats interact with domestic cats. And the answer seems to be no. But if they are within the same area, there could be competition for the same prey. So if they are feral, for feral domestic cats and for leopard cats, they will go for rodents. So if there are presence of domestic cats in wild areas where leopard cats are present, they might actually compete for the same prey, and leopard cats might have less prey that's available to them. So that's not ideal. So keep your cats at home, don't let them out. On Pulau Tekong, I have seen, I think there were at least 2 domestic cats on the island, and I've never seen leopard cats interact with the domestic cats, but the closest they were together in the same night, the same spot, was about 200 to 300 meters apart. And they might be actually hunting for rats in the same area as well. So competition in Singapore might be something that to be aware about too.
Okay. Yeah, so let's move to the last question. Vilma?
Yeah, there are several questions, Marcus, about what can people personally do? How can they help? How can they make a difference? And, in general, everybody, a lot of people are asking it, and also students, secondary school students, as well as university students, asking about in what way can they help?
So one thing that people could do well, if there is an ongoing leopard cat project, I'll definitely be interested to involve more people, especially going through leopard cat images, right? Spot the difference. That's something that people can do. But in terms of direct leopard cat conservation, other than speaking up for green spaces, you might also want to think about roadkills. So this is a major threat for leopard cats in Singapore. So if you see roadkills, report it to the authorities, report it to the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum to keep a database. These reports of roadkills actually go through a central database, and there are students that are working on roadkill, or if there are any projects that are looking at roadkill, they might help advise on where are the roadkill hotspots in Singapore. And with the knowledge of these hotspots, we've had several students that looked at it. It might actually help advise the authorities to introduce mitigation measures. So if there are leopard cats in the area, if the measures are in place, they are less likely to be killed on the road. So that's one thing. Beyond that, I think there was some discussion in the chat regarding photography as well. So if you care about wildlife, you want to have as little impact to wildlife as possible when moving through the forest. We know people like taking photos, and that's a way to appreciate them. So maybe not going to the forest in large groups. Avoid the use of repeated flash, because you would scare away the animals. Anyway, if you make too much noise, or if you keep, or there is a lot of impact if you're moving around the forest or taking photographs, the leopard cats will not be in the area anyway. So we have to mind our own personal behavior when in nature areas. So these are some important things to note when we're in nature areas as well.
Okay, thank you. Those are very good advice, and not just toward leopard cats, obviously in terms of all wildlife conservation. And for those of you who joined us late, actually, like Vilma mentioned earlier at the beginning, the SWAG, the Singapore Wildcat Action Group, we are prepared to do some outreach and in terms of leopard cat conservation. So Rachel has created a very, very beautiful leopard cat tote bag, and 100% of the profits from the sale of that leopard cat tote bag will be earmarked. We have earmarked that the profits for leopard cat conservation. So please do go over to our website. You'll find the link to our website in the chat box, and take a look at the bag and support us. And with that, I'd like to thank, oh no, before that, I'd like to give you guys a teaser. So our upcoming, we have another Wildcat lecture coming up in September, and it is about a wildcat species that many of you have mentioned that you are very interested in. So look out for updates in our Facebook pages and PTIX, and the next talk is going to be on fishing cats, and that's going to be in September. So if you don't follow us already, please follow us and you get the updates. And again, with that, let me thank Marcus for your time and sharing those beautiful images and your knowledge with us and the insight. And also, I'd like to thank all of you who joined us today from everywhere in the world. And before we go, can we ask you to turn on your camera now, because we would like to do a Wi-Fi. And Marcus, would you be able to do that for us?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks again for having me. I'll take the Wi-Fi now, so if everyone wants to be in a photo, please turn on your cameras and smile.